Welcome back to the second of the series of discussion on politics and social movement. Here again we got our eminent resource person, Mr. Susil Sirivardhana. In this discussion, his experience is really important because he was the commissioner of Janasavya program, one of the best poverty alleviation program sometime back during President Premadasa's period. So most of the post Premadasa period, state government took that as a model for the development or poverty alleviation. Here, our main focus is to see the connection between politics and social movement. So how politics and social movement can be linked. Here we have resource person Susil. He has a lot of experience in working with poverty-related issues and also youth issues. Susil, how do you explain do you see connection between politics and social movement?
Yes, there is an intimate connection between politics and social movement. One very dramatic way of seeing this in action is in the various freedom struggles under colonialism. Of course, freedom struggles involve politics and society. But it's a very integrated struggle which knits together all the different forms of organization, but it's a very clear expression of that struggle. Another example, a very good example and familiar to us, would be the People's Movement, which overthrew the hated previous regime and political order on January 8th. That was a very dramatic movement because it was all compressed into a very short time, and it happened in front of our very eyes. And then it has been sustained after January 8th. And the voice of civil society never went down, was never reduced after January 8th. On the other hand, it has been sustained and it has been continuing. If you change the scenario and go for another example, there has been, for example, people will realize the protests against Wall Street. That is, of course, in a developed industrial society of America and Europe, where again a group of deprived people and masses are rising up in protest against their capitalist rulers and the business sector, the multinational corporations, etc., because they find it difficult to live. Though they are developed countries and though the outer form of development is there, from when we look at them or see them on TV, still they have experienced a lot of deprivations which have compelled them to get onto the streets and even indulge in violence, against the police and the state. So those would be, I would say. So from all those examples, we can draw the inference that social movements are oppositional. And oppositional in a very definite sense, in a sense that they arise when negotiation is no longer possible. So it's at an advanced state of sort of exploding, that the social movement really comes out onto the street. So that would be, I would say, the fundamental relationship between social movements and politics.
In everyday lives, we have seen, people fight for various causes. Let's say, small example from building a road to developing education. Let's say 6% for education movement, right? So people voluntarily develop kind of theme. They put forward a theme, but I personally feel politicians come there and they grab the theme. And from there, they take the baton and take it forward. How do you explain this?
Yeah, that's a good question. A real civil society doesn't let politicians or any outsiders grab their platform. A real civil society has got to that point of getting onto the street or of mobilizing in that sense, because they have failed to communicate or negotiate with the powers that be. You see, and certainly, as you say, I mean, the powers that be, when they realize that the people cannot be contained and that the people are very, very angry and aggressive, they will try to dilute it and co-opt it and so on and so forth. But that is where the unity and the quality of leadership of a civil society is very important. Not to surrender midway, to various tactics and attempts on the part of political groups to subvert it.
Yeah. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Why, in that sense, as according to my experience, Sri Lankan social movements have failed? In our everyday basis, movements have failed because politicians have grabbed the baton. Why it happens? Why our people are not that politically conscious, or why it is happening?
No, definitely. I mean, though we have a high rate of literacy, and though we have a high percentage of people who have passed out at O levels and even A levels, still those people are not educated or literate in a civil society and in a political sense.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, they haven't developed the criticality, the ability to ask questions against the governing forces. Or to put it another way, that is what is called co-optation. I mean, they've been co-opted, always the elite forces and their instruments like the media have been both co-opting them and distracting them, diverting them. And look at the Sunday papers that are put out in Sinhala, in the Sinhala language Sunday papers. They all consist of horror stories, ghost stories about karma, this, that, nothing to do with, the day-to-day experience of the people. When there are major issues confronting the society, the bulk of the media do not concentrate and analyze those issues. In order to raise the consciousness of the people, they are trying to divert them and distract them, their attention elsewhere. So that is why, such forces die down and don't develop an intensity that they should develop.
In our everyday social life, we have seen people create politicians, right? People think this is how the politician should behave. This is how should be his attire. He should be having this number of bodyguards. He should be having this number of vehicles. That is how politicians are constructed. If a particular politician doesn't have such power, such material facilities or bodyguards and all, people do not accept. How do you see this?
This, in other words, that happens because the political process in our society is always creating myths and always, cultivating illusions to divert the attention of the people and divert criticism away from the attention of the people. Now, that is where community education, citizen education, adult education is fundamental for the sustenance of a civil society movement. And their civil society itself has a lot of lessons to learn because, for example, as you know better than me, we have never had an adult education movement in our country.
That's right, yeah.
Whereas, if you look at the rest of the world, even very developed industrial countries have adult education, particularly in a context of globalization and technology development and such rapid change it is very important that adults go through a continuous process of what is called lifelong education. I mean, it is only then they can appreciate the value of institutions, when institutions are going down, etc., etc. So, I would argue that we need a movement and a process for community education as a matter of priority.
I accept your point. Of course, people don't have proper understanding about what is conceptual understanding, what is state, what is the role of what is regime, what is government, what is parliament, what is the role of parliamentarians and all. Another aspect what we see in everyday life is that people expect politicians to give them electricity supply, water supply, provide them a house. The state welfare has, the politicians have become agents of state welfare, and people to accept it. How do you explain this?
Because our politics has been sustained on the basis of creating dependency. Dependency. So, it's a kind of very sort of MP-centric, politician-centric kind of political situation. And there has been a long period of conditioning where members of the public have been conditioned to go behind politicians to solve their problems.
That's right.
That's a very shrewd anti-democratic tactic to prevent people from organizing, to weaken civil society, and to cultivate a sense of dependence on individuals and MPs.
Right.
You see, and people don't realize that that is counterproductive.
And more than that, this is public life. When it comes to private affairs, private life of the people, they invite politicians for weddings, they invite politicians for funerals and various events of individual private life. They change even the auspicious times of the various occasions in order to suit the timetable of the politicians. So, you have an experience to share with?
Yes, I mean, that shows the excessive dependency and fixation on the part of society on politicians. I mean, we have taken it to extreme levels, and as you say, and that is also a part of the sort of social underdevelopment that people are very interested in status, show, appearances.
That's right.
I mean, that's why you get politicians to come and sign at weddings, to come and give prizes and so on. I mean, in other words, the point that we are trying to make is that the politician's role is exceeded, in Sri Lankan society. I mean, they have a certain role. I mean, but in Sri Lankan society, that role is practiced beyond all reasonable proportions and exceeded. Partly, I think, because of our underdevelopment. And when I say underdevelopment, still, I think there's a lot of hangover of feudalism. You see, though we think we are modern and we are no longer feudal, I think there are a lot of feudal hangovers still existent and functional in our mindsets.
So, that is really an interesting point to conclude the discussion. During this session, we were discussing about politics and social movements, and also some extent how politicization is happening in the public sphere of the people and also the private sphere. This is really never-ending debate, and we have taken an initiative. Perhaps as students of politics and social movements, we all together can continue this discussion. Thank you very much.